Okay, hello Jessie. Thank you very much for agreeing to record this just in case our technology lets us down on the day. I wanted to ask you a few questions about your understanding and knowledge about the barriers to women's empowerment in Malawi. Can we start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and your motivation or your connection with gender equality in Malawi?
My name is Jessie Kabwila. I'm actually a senior lecturer in the University of Malawi. I also do a lot of activism. I'm very involved in land issues. I'm involved in sexual minorities issues in general. I get involved into this from, I have to say, from a feminist perspective, because I for me, I'm not just a feminist by training. I also identify as one, and that identity has helped me not only to carve my career, but in order to be who I am. So a lot of the things that I do, for example, how involved I am on sexual minority issues, it is actually from a perspective of somebody who has had to live a life often linked to be a cut and paste from, people would say it's because your father is educated, it's because your father, it's because you spent time out of the country. So I would say I pretty much understand what it is like to live life in the margins, to be different, and to go against the hegemonic current, so to speak. So I come into this from a feminist perspective, an African feminist perspective, that is also quite cognizant of how different these isms are and how they have to speak to the space and time that one is living in. So that's how I come into women's equality issues. But in what I teach, I research in, is about women's issues. Let me say issues of women versus men. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And in our meeting on the 4th is about women's economic empowerment. What do you see as the main barriers to women's economic success in Malawi? Are those barriers cultural?
The main barriers that I see, first and foremost, I think it's the patriarchal culture that Malawi is founded upon. I think often the tendency when people talk about economic empowerment is to look at resources and say that women in Malawi are suffering because we are a poor country, economically. But I look at it differently. I think the issue is ideological poverty, most and foremost, is where the problem is. When you are in a country where your personhood is constructed from being a complement of somebody, and we get this not from our culture only. I argue that actually it is mainly from the Euro-Western organized religion, be it Islam, be it Christianity. You'd find that now Malawi majority are Christians. Malawi, people have even gone to a point of saying Malawi is a God-fearing country. It is seen as a Christian country, meaning that majority of the people look at a woman from an Adam and Eve perspective, from a perspective of somebody who had to borrow a rib of someone in order to be in existence. Now, to me, even if you put resources to such kind of a person, they still feel duty bound to go and ask Adam what they should do with whatever it is you've given them, right? And they think they owe the world an apology for being in existence. Indigenous cultures don't help either, because when you have a place where traditionally when a chief dies and he's going to be buried, he has to be buried with virgins, the women, and never the other side. A place where polyandry is not even talked about. We only talk about polygyny, showing that to a large extent this is a culture that commodifies women, that looks at them as a complement, an addition. If you look at our popular culture, it tells you that. So I would say first and foremost it is the double patriarchy that Malawian women live under, that Malawian men, that manhood and womanhood is constructed under. The second barrier that I see is definitely that of resources. the fact that when you are coming from a country where resources are inadequate, and I'm talking here especially structurally, where you don't have a system, you don't have a systems-driven leadership and way of governance, it becomes a problem. I mean, I'm talking right now in a country where there is no identity system. You don't have an identity card. Now, if there's what that means is the struggle for resources, or the way to allocate resources, is a thing that lacks structure. It is done on the basis of almost winner takes it all, and survival of the fittest. Now, survival of the fittest is a bit of a problem when you are going to be pregnant at a certain point, and you menstruate at a certain point. You are a person who's got lots of hormones, and you care about people. In other words, here I'm saying the condition disadvantages many women. Their mothers at a certain point, they have to breastfeed, they have to whatever. This, in other words, the intersection of biology and lack of resources, lack of structures, lack of resources, puts women in a very difficult position. Another thing that is there is when there's very little resources to compete for, because I have to be honest that the corruption I see in my home, the lack of resources that I have is not unique to Malawi. Other countries also go through the same. But here, when the cake is smaller, when the national cake is smaller, then it means it enhances any small mistake becomes very big. I was educated in the US myself. I saw people being corrupt there. I saw leaders who were mismanaging funds, people who built airports that are never going to be used, and they used a lot of money. But I think the difference is what they have to share there is not as meager as what we have here. So I would say the history of poverty, the historical poverty, and the fact that women during the colonial times were not to be educated actually enhances this, because now illiteracy is the other hurdle that I feel women that have been adopted so liberally by most African countries from there's this talk of merit. We'll only employ so and so if you've got merit. We would like women to join our parties, but they should be people who deliver to the party. We would like to hire someone in a company, but she should be able to perform. Well, the unfortunate part is that women have been structurally discriminated. They have been put outside the formal education system. They had to fight in order to get there. I also know that even in Scotland and England, all these other places, women had to fight for it. But here I think it comes with a double yoke, because they only not had to fight it from a gender angle, they had to fight it from a racial angle too, from a class angle too, which was infused with the colonialism. Our history, the coloniality by legacy, unfortunately, works out a double yoke to the women. So you have a lot of women who probably are not educated and are having to cope in a system that says, in order for you to be a person, in order for you to be a human being, you have to be educated. This is playing havoc on issues of land, for example, because now the new bill was proposing that people must register in order for them to say their own land. And when you talk about registering, you're talking about paperwork. You're talking about people who have got an identity that is seen in a formal system. And that's a thing that for many women is a problem because of the illiteracy. So I know you have other questions. Let me just say, patriarchy for me comes number one, the poverty that Malawi is battling, the illiteracy is a problem. Then comes the whole issue of gender inequality. I think the fact that women, I want to emphasize that patriarchy, yes, has those double problems, but the inequality that generates GBV, gender-based violence, and renders people very difficult to fight HIV, to negotiate safe sex, to negotiate sex work in a way that someone takes it as labor and they are not disadvantaged. They don't end up endangering their lives. If you are not educated, if you are seen as a person who is a second-class citizen to the person you are talking about. So if I had to go and give the liter of barriers, HIV does come up. Things like sex work become a problem. Gender-based violence becomes a violence to women becomes a problem. But to me, all these are symptomatic. They actually are being generated by the main theme that it is about how gender is constructed in Malawi. It is about who a woman is vis-a-vis a man. It is about what are the systems of logic, what are the epistemologies that are being employed in terms of who is a person and who can speak and who should sit on the table. How are we doing our budgets? Like right now, if you look at the budget that has just been released for this year up to next year, it gives very little money on sexual reproductive health rights, and yet we've got unsafe abortions that are killing so many poor women. And when you look at structures, like how are we doing? You notice that gender budgeting is very, very little. We even don't have the capacity for gender budgeting in most of the ministries. And yet, if you look at the MDGs, the ones that Malawi is lagging behind are the ones that have to do with women and gender issues. Yet, we are not institutionalizing gender budgeting, and we are not institutionalizing the deconstruction of patriarchy, be it the one generated by religion, organized religion, or indigenous systems, and indeed the fusion of the two, which is what I think needs to be happening.
Okay, Jessie, thank you very much. You've actually answered my third question, which is about the impact that these barriers are having on development outcomes in Malawi. So thank you very much for that. We're going to close this recording just now and come back to you in a couple of minutes for the next part of it. Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Moira. Thank you.